Hello, everybody. This is Tilly Redmond, and I'm here today to talk to you about Asperger's syndrome. I have a handout on Blackboard for you to follow along with. Asperger's syndrome is a specific diagnosis under the autism spectrum. Other disabilities under the autism spectrum include autism, Rett's disorder, childhood degenerative disorder, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, also known as PDD-NOS. Asperger syndrome was first identified by Dr. Hans Asperger, an Austrian clinician, and that was around the 1940s. After Hans died, Lorna Wing used the term for the first time. Lorna used the term to distinguish a new and more specific diagnosis of autism. The diagnosis of Asperger's is described by severe impairments in interaction and communication, along with repetitive stereotyped interests. The DSM is a handbook that is used to diagnose and to learn about mental illnesses. Asperger syndrome has changed in the DSM. In previous DSMs, like the DSM-4, Asperger syndrome had its own specific criteria and diagnosis. The newest DSM, the DSM-5, has taken out AS as a separate diagnosis. Now, for an individual to be diagnosed with AS, the individual must meet the qualifications under the autism spectrum disorder. Like other disorders, early intervention and early diagnosis is key for Asperger's syndrome. It is important for teachers, parents, doctors, and other professionals to be aware of red flags when dealing with students, especially at a young age. Some red flags to look for in a young individual or a person is perfectionism, atypical fears, sensory issues, ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder symptoms, and numerous meltdowns. If an individual shows signs of a number of these red flags, then they should be tested and looked at for further diagnosis. This does not mean that individuals that have these red flags have Asperger's syndrome, but it's important for us to look at these red flags as possibilities. There are a number of interventions that can be used when working with individuals with Asperger's syndrome. The first intervention that should be used is an FBA, also known as a functional behavior assessment. To use an FBA, teachers, professionals, and the parents of the individual should all work together to collect data on the student. The information that's gathered from this team should include the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence of any undesired behavior. Another type of intervention is ABI, also known as antecedent-based intervention. This intervention would be done after an FBA is performed. A few more interventions include PECS, or Picture Exchange Communication, social stories, or physical boundaries. All of these interventions can be used separately or together, but the main thing you need to make sure is that you always have consistency. There are common areas of concern when dealing with individuals with Asperger's syndrome. Those with AS are prone to anxiety, depression, and bullying because of their lack of social and communication skills. The most important thing that needs to be remembered when dealing with those with Asperger's syndrome is that every individual is different. Although one intervention works for one student, it does not mean it will work for another. Also, if you have an intervention that is working or a reward that a student is working for, know that those will change. Asperger's syndrome is a very complex disability. Even though one might like to be an expert on it, it's almost impossible because every person with Asperger's is so different. To learn more about Asperger's, I suggest that you look at different resources. Some resources that I've found to be very helpful is OCALI, which is the Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incident. This is online at ocali.org. Also, an author that I found to be very helpful is Tony Atwood. One of his books that I used is The Complete Guide to Asperger's Syndrome. He also has a lot of other books, but this one I highly recommend. I hope that you learned some useful information about Asperger's syndrome, and I hope that you will go out on your own and learn more. Thanks.